Disney built its empire on fairy tales, but one division quietly rewrote what a studio could be. Searchlight Pictures lives inside the most powerful entertainment company on Earth, yet operates like an outsider. It has produced some of the most uncomfortable, challenging, and brilliant films of the last 30 years. This is the story of a label that was never supposed to exist inside a corporation like Disney. It is an experiment in contradiction. Commercial infrastructure funding deeply uncommercial art. And somehow, against every expectation, it has largely worked. Understanding Searchlight means understanding the strange, uneasy relationship between art and money in Hollywood. It also means understanding why the films that make us most uncomfortable often matter the most. The story begins not with Disney, but with a scrappy little specialty label born in 1994. Fox Searchlight was founded as a specialty division of 20th Century Fox, designed to chase prestige on a budget. The 1990s were a golden era for independent cinema, and the major studios wanted a piece of it. Miramax had proven that small films could win Oscars and generate enormous cultural heat. Fox wanted its own vehicle for the kind of films that would never get greenlit on the main lot. Searchlight was lean, hungry, and given unusual freedom to pursue its own creative instincts. Its early acquisitions were scrappy, curious, and deeply specific. Films with a distinct point of view. The label developed a reputation for discovering films that other studios were too nervous to touch. It was a specialty label in the truest sense. Not mini-major, not fully independent, something in between. From the very beginning, Searchlight understood that the margins were where the most interesting work lived. The question was whether a corporate parent would ever let them stay there. No single film defined Searchlight more completely than The Full Monty in 1990. Made for $8 million, it earned over $250 million worldwide and launched the label's identity. It was funny, heartbreaking, and profoundly human. Exactly the kind of film the mainstream ignored. Napoleon Dynamite arrived in 2004, grossing $46 million on a $400,000 budget. Juno, in 2007, proved that a sharp, idiosyncratic voice could still find a mass audience. Slumdog Millionaire swept the Oscars in 2009 and became one of the great underdog stories in cinema history. Black Swan terrified and transfixed audiences in 2010, becoming an unlikely blockbuster of psychological horror. Each of these films was a risk that most studios would have declined before breakfast. Together, they form a portrait of a label with genuine taste and the courage to back it. Searchlight's identity was never a formula. It was a sensibility, and that made all the difference. The best Searchlight films feel like they were made in spite of the system, not because of it. In 2019, Disney completed its $71 billion acquisition of 21st Century Fox. It was one of the largest media deals in history, reshaping the entire entertainment landscape overnight. Inside the deal was a strange inheritance. Fox Searchlight, now suddenly a Disney subsidiary. The creative community held its breath, uncertain whether the art house label would survive the culture clash. Disney rebranded the label simply as Searchlight Pictures, stripping the Fox name from its identity. The optics were jarring. A company built on family-friendly magic now owned a division that made adult dramas. Industry analysts debated whether Disney would neuter the label or allow it to maintain its edge. The answer, it turned out, was more complicated and more interesting than anyone predicted. Disney kept Searchlight's leadership largely intact, a signal that they valued the brand's credibility. What happened next would test whether independence of spirit can survive inside an empire. The first major test came with The Favorite in 2018, just before the acquisition closed. Yorgos Lanthimos' darkly comic royal drama earned 10 Academy Award nominations and signaled a confident new era. Nomadland arrived in 2021 and swept the Oscars, winning Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actress. It was a quiet, devastating meditation on grief and freedom made for $5 million. Under Disney's ownership, Searchlight had just produced the most acclaimed film of its entire history. The Banshees of Inisherin in 2022 earned 9 Oscar nominations. Dark, brutal, and unmistakably Searchlight. Poor Things won the Palme d'Or equivalent in Venice, confirming the label's global artistic standing. These were not films that Disney would ever make through its main channels, and that was the point. The parent company's infrastructure quietly supported work that challenged, disturbed, and provoked its audiences. Searchlight had not just survived the Disney acquisition, It appeared to be thriving inside it. Prestige filmmaking is a peculiar business that runs on reputation as much as revenue. A film can lose money theatrically and still be considered a strategic success for the right studio. Oscar nominations generate enormous publicity that money simply cannot buy through traditional advertising. For Disney, Searchlight's awards credibility provides a form of cultural legitimacy that the main brand cannot manufacture. It signals to filmmakers, critics, and audiences that the corporation has taste beyond the blockbuster machine. The specialty film market has always operated on thin margins, making bold bets on unproven material. Disney's resources give Searchlight a safety net that true independent labels simply do not have. Marketing budgets, global distribution networks, and streaming access through Hulu amplify every Searchlight release. This is the paradox at the heart of the label. Corporate power enabling anti-corporate storytelling. The arrangement works precisely because both sides understand what the other brings to the table. Searchlight needs the infrastructure, and Disney needs the credibility. It is an uneasy but durable alliance. Not everyone believes the Searchlight model is as pure as its reputation suggests. Critics argue that Disney's ownership inevitably shapes which projects get greenlit and which do not. The invisible hand of a corporation is always present, even when it chooses not to interfere directly. Filmmakers who work with Searchlight often describe unusual creative freedom, but freedom within certain unspoken limits. There are films that will never be made under a Disney subsidiary, regardless of their artistic merit. The most radical, the most politically combustible, the most sexually transgressive work will find another home. This self-censorship by proximity is difficult to measure but impossible to dismiss entirely. At the same time, Nomadland and Poor Things would challenge that argument with enormous force. The tension between commerce and art is not unique to Searchlight. It defines all of Hollywood. What makes Searchlight unusual is how deliberately and self-consciously it navigates that tension. The rise of streaming has complicated the art house model in ways that cut to its very foundation. Specialty films have always depended on the theatrical experience to generate word of mouth and critical momentum. Putting a prestige film on a streaming platform the same day it opens in theaters can destroy that momentum. Searchlight has largely resisted day and date streaming, defending the theatrical window with unusual conviction. The label understands that the mystique of its films depends partly on the ritual of going to see them. Nomadland played in theaters before landing on Hulu, preserving the experience that earned it its Oscars. But Disney's streaming ambitions create constant pressure to feed the platform with premium content quickly. The long-term health of Searchlight may depend on its ability to resist that pressure consistently. If specialty films become streaming content, they risk losing the cultural weight that makes them matter. The theater is not just a venue. For films like these, it is part of the meaning. In an industry increasingly dominated by sequels and intellectual property, Searchlight represents something rare and necessary. It is a laboratory for the kind of original storytelling that the mainstream machine has largely abandoned. When Searchlight releases a film, it sends a signal that certain stories still deserve to be told at scale. It gives filmmakers like Chloe Zhao and Yorgos Lanthimos a path to global audiences that would otherwise not exist. The films it champions often become the touchstones by which a generation defines its relationship to cinema. Without labels like Searchlight, the cultural middle ground between blockbusters and true indie disappears entirely. That middle ground is where cinema grows, challenges itself, and refuses to become mere product. Disney may have acquired Searchlight, but it has not yet succeeded in making it predictable. And in Hollywood, unpredictability, true, genuine unpredictability, is the rarest commodity of all. The experiment continues, quietly, stubbornly, defiantly, frame by frame, film by film. Searchlight Pictures is proof that even inside an empire, there is still room for something that refuses to be tamed.